Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session of the CoLab competition. This session actually combines two groups, one on building efficiency and one on waste management. We have three presentations that we will hear in just a moment. Let me first introduce myself and the panel. I am Bill Muma. I'm a professor at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University, where I work on international environment resource policy issues. To my right is Professor Kent Courtney of Tufts University, who is in the political science department and has done major work on and published a wonderful book on sustainable cities. Next to him is Stephen Hammer, who is with the World Bank's Urban Development and Resilience Unit, and he's a lead urban specialist, so very well. We have two people here, obviously very well suited for this process. And then on my far right is Associate Professor John Fernandez, who's in the Building Technology Program in the Department of Architecture at MIT. We have, as I said, three presentations. We're actually going to do them separately, go through each one, since they're each so different one from the other that seemed to make most sense to those of us on the panel. And we'll begin each one with a showing of a video, and then there will be. Actually, I might ask if one of my colleagues to just make any comments they would like to make very briefly on the particular topic we'll be discussing. It will show the video, and then we will go to some comments by the panel, and then we'll go to some question and answer with the parties who have submitted their these several proposals. So the three proposals that we have before us are the three winners, actually. Smart LED street lamp systems through the implementation of mesh networks, proposal to be implemented in Mexico. Under waste management, 2030, zero construction, renovation, demolition, waste to landfill by 2030. And the third one is energy efficiency-based formalization, a title which may not be entirely obvious, but I think you'll get it when you hear from the presenters. Would you like to say something about the LED? Would anybody like to comment on that just briefly before we begin, or should we just let? All right, let's just let them begin. Okay, could we have the video, please, of the LED street lamp system? Pardon? Yes. Okay.
Okay. Could I start or? Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hector Bracamontes. I'm doing this project with the company BioCapital, which is a financial institution, but it is also a project developer for commercial and public lighting. Well, our project, the title of our project is Smart LED Street Lamp System to the implementation of a mesh network. Okay, we decided to do this project because 60% of the total energy consumption of a small city comes from public lighting. The rest is water pumping and public building. So we saw an opportunity here to reduce the energy consumption. The project is not just replacing the luminaire with the LED technology. It is about to implement a telemanagement system that we control the street lamps and will allow to measure and verify the consumption of this energy. Will not only reduce the electrical energy, it will reduce also fuel from the maintenance services, the fuel that the patrols utilize to verify these street lamps. Well, the specific actions that this project comprise is the implementation of a pilot network of around 50 nodes that will transmit and receive data from a gateway controller that will transmit the data to a central management server. The benefits of this project is that the technology gap between big cities and smaller cities will be reduced. Also, the municipalities will have more resources to invest in other stuff like social programs. But also, the infrastructure from this network will be utilized, could be utilized by street surveying sensors, pollution monitoring sensors, or even traffic monitoring sensors. Well, this project there is expected to reduce until 60% of carbon emission, and will be developed by a biocapital and a technology supplier, together with a municipality where biocapital has implemented already projects. And until now, we have spoken with some technology suppliers, some international, some national suppliers, and some municipalities. But right now, we are looking also for financing to do this pilot that will work as a demonstration for small cities that this system can work. From my part, I think it's all. I don't have if you have any questions.
See if anyone would like to make. Each of us will make a few comments, and then we'd like to ask you some questions and get your reaction. So, who would like to begin? John?
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the proposal. It was very clear when I went through it. I guess I have a couple of comments on this. In the sense of the scale of the project, I think it's very reasonable. It's something that I see happening more and more, especially in developing contexts where relatively small-scale testbed project is an important entry into or deployment of a technology which may need to be tested. The fact is, though, that I think the testbed scenario is interesting far beyond the technological efficacy of the system, because many other questions come to mind. So maintenance, ability of the city to actually do the monitoring that you have planned. The durability, certainly the acceptance by the local community. I know in some developing contexts, the scavenging of power and the reuse of, all those are issues. They're not technology issues. They're really technology deployment issues. And I think there have been a couple of comments that were online about how this has been done before and we know it works. What's the novelty here? And I think the novelty is in place. Actually, this proposal in the particular context that you proposed. So that's one comment I have. The second comment I have is I would tend to agree with what was posted as a comment on the photovoltaic possibilities here. I think it's not included in the proposal. I understand that it adds complexity to the system. I wonder whether the small network can avail itself of a small farm. So maybe you don't have photovoltaics on each one, but maybe you have a centralized facility that they're all wired into. That might be an interesting way to both protect the photovoltaic panels themselves, but also to derive a little bit more power. So I think that's something that I wasn't convinced that should be just dismissed as part of the system. I'm more convinced that adding a lot of functionality may be problematic. So a lot of sensors and trying to do too much at its inception may lead to just unnecessary complications. That's
okay. Anyone else?
Thanks very much. This resonates quite a bit with me because of some of the work that we are doing at the bank, at the World Bank right now. We are in the midst of launching a major new financing initiative that will seek to help cities roll out LED street lighting broadly across the world. We're not going as far as Hector would take it in terms of adding these type of sensors. And I think part of the challenges are going to be in terms of implementation. And some of the big issues that we see are very much institutional in nature. What you find in different cities is that the ownership structure for the streetlights can vary widely. It can be the local utility, it can be central government, it might be the municipality, perhaps they have an ESCO that actually owns it. And so you run into all these institutional challenges in terms of who is going to benefit from this type of system versus who is going to accrue the cost savings. So that would be one issue that I think we can't easily dismiss. Great technology ideas run into the realities on the ground. The second thing is, again, and I'm working in a variety of geographic contexts, cities large and small in different parts of the world. I was in Africa last week talking to the mayor of Lusaka in Zambia, and he spends $1.25 million a year on his street lighting. And the problem that cities in his position often find is that it's impossible to get the financing in place to do these upgrades. And part of that relates to the fact that cities like Lusaka don't have access to private capital markets. ESCOs don't exist in their part of the world. And so how do you move forward with these kinds of technological innovations when you have such fundamental, again, institutional challenges that would impede that innovation? So those are the kinds of things that we're having to address. I also want to just highlight the cost savings are clear from increased efficiency, but one of the things that you might see is in the form of a rebound effect, where improved lighting, reduced cost, enables the city to expand the amount of lighting that it provides, longer hours, broader coverage of the lighting around the city, and that will enhance local safety. It can, increase the attractiveness of the city in many different ways. And so there might actually be an offset, and you won't see a net cost savings to the city. Although you clearly, start from that perspective, cities have multiple aims that they're trying to achieve, and cost savings or carbon reduction can be one of them, but at the same time, they will then look at opportunities to do things slightly differently or better. So again, I think that this is an interesting idea. I think that John captured some of the challenges in terms of the implementation challenges in terms of managing a more complex network like this are not to be dismissed. But from my perspective, we keep running into the very pragmatic market or institutional environment that will make it difficult for these significant technological leaps to actually occur.
Thanks, Bill. I'm just going to echo what John and Steve said, perhaps articulating some of the issues a little differently than they did, but they covered what I consider to be some of the really central issues that probably needs to be addressed. Focusing just on the proposal itself, it wasn't clear to me where the financing comes from in this project to support the full implementation that's being proposed, especially the cost of the capital cost of the hardware. It seemed to be some funding mechanism implied that wasn't really described. At least I couldn't find it. So that's something that needs to be made a little clearer. I also would recommend that some provision be made for assessment of the project, particularly using some sort of life cycle costing so we can have some sense of um, what is the long-term savings and what is the carbon reduction. I think that we all understand that when you can combine cost savings with carbon reduction, that is a very important thing to do. But the carbon side of the savings is kind of understated here and needs to be elaborated a little bit. Let me just say a little bit about the mesh network controlling system. It wasn't clear to me in the proposal what kinds of savings accrued just from that as opposed to the LED installations. And I think we need to have some sense of what we're buying with this control system. It seemed to me likely, although I don't know very much about this, that most of the savings would come from just replacing whatever the standard light bulbs are, whether it's incandescent or sodium vapor. I don't know, have any idea what they use with LED. Most of the savings, I think, would come from that, at least in the short run. So I'd like to know more about the mesh network. And finally, the proposal says several times that one of the advantages of the mesh network is that it's sort of decentralized and you can maintain control over the lighting in the face of natural disasters. And yet, it seems to me that in the face of natural disasters, you're not going to have any electricity anyway, so unless you have a PV system to do it. So I would recommend either dropping that argument or elaborating it so we understand, what it does. So those are my comments.
Hector, would you like to respond to any of these questions that were raised?
Yeah, I will respond generally. Finance for the total deployment is we have not checked it already. So we need to first we need to demonstrate this that this network is will be working for a small for the electrical network that we have in Mexico. The infrastructure is not so advanced as the United States or Europe. So that's why first we need to deploy a pilot, to demonstrate that it will work and we have no fails during the operation. Okay, the other thing, the sensors will depend, the extra sensors will depend on the municipality needs. If they need street surveillance, will be added. But I mean that in the infrastructure for this control can be the same to add more sensors, but will depend on the municipality needs. The other issue is that, for example, about you ask about the most of the savings will come from the replacing the LED lamps. Okay, yeah, most of the savings comes from only replacing, but you know that that in Mexico is not the electricity from the street lamps are not measured. It's just a declaration of the city that they have these lamps with this power output, and the public utility charge with this statement, and because the electricity network supplies energy to the public lighting and to the other public services. So that's why public lighting is not measured, and this system will work to measure the only public lighting that will give us a better understanding of the consumption, the energy consumption of this public lighting.
Okay. I just had one comment I wanted to make is on the financing. I mean, there's private financing, which obviously would require some kind of return on that investment. I'm not trying to commit you here, but there is World Bank financing for these kinds of things, and other organizations. But there's also here I'll do full disclosure. I'm on the board of an organization called the Climate Group, and this is an organization that tries to engage the private sector and subnational governments, provinces, cities, and so forth in addressing climate change. And one of the alliances that we've helped to create is under a rubric of the climate revolution, is a manufacturer, a major manufacturer of LEDs, has made a commitment to actually invest quite a few millions of dollars in LED projects in developing countries. Most of the focus has been on Asia, but there's no reason why it couldn't be done in Mexico. So you might want to, if we could talk offline later, and I can at least put you in touch with people. Can't promise anything, obviously, but there are probably other such opportunities out there. These private companies are really interested in getting their products out and showing what they can do. Yes.
Maybe if I can add to that, I work for UNDP, and we do a lot of work with Global Environmental Facility, and they have their new programming period starts in June, around June 2014. LED street lighting is going to be one of the big areas, and they're specifically looking at triangulating between them, the implementing agencies within the countries, and the private sector. So that may be something that you wish to look into, given the sort of the country allocation for Mexico within the.
Okay, sounds like we're maybe being helpful here. That's good. That's great. Opportunities. Let me just turn to the audience and see if there are any questions or comments that anyone in the audience would like to make. Raise. Yes. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, good question. Right. I mean, the impression is given that the networking makes the whole system operate even more efficiently. And I guess the question is how much more efficiently, and for how much extra cost is that? And what are the benefits of really doing this networking? Because that was something new to me as well. So, Hector, would you be able to comment on that?
Yes. Okay. The mesh network works with it's not a star this configuration allows that if a communication node is not working, goes down, the whole system is still working, because there are other configurations like a star configuration that if a communication node goes down, the whole system stops to work. So that's why we think this configuration will be more useful for a street lamp system, that if a communication node goes down, the street lamps will be working. The control of the street lamps will be still working. So that's why we think more than cost, we think in security, because if the street lamps goes down and the lights are turned off, that could be the security will be reduced. That's why.
It is a yes.
It's pretty simple to balance these days. It's easy to do electronics to figure out throwing a lot of power and not throwing enough power.
Yes. All right. But there is one here. Okay, sorry for those of you in Etherland. You may have missed that last question, but you probably got from the answer that it's a question of security and so on more than efficiency, that we're having this network to monitor things and so on.
Very quick comment. So there are two principles that I'm looking for in this project. Is how does it dematerialize the system overall? So how is there less material, less resources, less energy? And so I want to push the system a little bit more. Maybe the other is, this is essentially decentralizing the provision for the controlling. And I think that's a really effective way to begin to modernize municipal systems to be district level control, and that I think is an interesting concept.
There's one other point that the control functions will actually, in addition to telling you if there is less consumption, you might be able to see if there is theft occurring, because you might actually begin to see spikes, and it'll tell you where in the network the theft is occurring. And so in terms of excess expenditures by the municipality or by whoever owns the network, this would also be very effective at that.
Good point. There's another hand here in the audience. Yes? Okay. The question was whether or not there's the ability for this to expand from municipal only to other small businesses or others who also need for security reasons, and for obviously if you want your customers to come in at night, it has to be well lighted, and there may be all kinds of reasons why there would be other people besides the municipality that would be interested in this type of technology. Is it possible? I mean, could you buy just one of these and put it next to your shop, which is not on the main street, that has the LED modern street lights on it? Hector?
Yeah, it's possible to do a network for only a business. I mean, I can imagine a parking lot, for example, or a university. Actually, there were tests in California for this kind of systems to a university, USA Davis. But the thing is that even for example, for a municipality, a small municipality, it's difficult to find finance because the size of the financing is not attractive for most financial institutions. They prefer big cities or metropolis, or so maybe for a small business it will depend on the ability to find credit alone for this. So as you mentioned before, is it the one of the main challenges is the financial service or institutional challenge to overcome.
We only have time for about a couple more minutes, but John, it's fine. Is there anyone else in the audience before I turn to other members of the panel for any last questions or comments? John, you were going to just raise a question or comment?
So one thought that comes to mind, we're doing work in Chile along the Atacama Desert in these mining towns, and these are essentially company towns. It seems to me that financing might, in those sorts of situations, be private, public financing of a system, which could also then migrate into the facilities of the company itself. So I think in many cities there may be a very short list of large players, private players, who might be able to leverage some public money.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much. And Hector, thank you for your submission and your congratulations on your success in making it into the winner's circle. I hope these comments and questions have been helpful to you. So we wish you well with this endeavor, and if you successfully make this work in a province in Mexico, it's possible this could expand well beyond that. So thank you very much.
Thank you to you.
Okay, can we move on to the next, which we were going to do the Mission 2030 next. Is that what you have queued up to show? Yes, would you please show the video for the zero construction, renovation, demolition, waste to landfill by 2030.
Hello, my name is Renee Greco, founding president CEO of the Construction Resource Initiative Council, a nonprofit organization incorporated in 2011 to drive building industry change in the way it views and it deals with its resources, starting with its so-called waste. Our first initiative, Mission 2030, is a call to action to eliminate the concept of waste, so that by 2030, no construction, renovation, or demolition materials would end up. Therefore, Mission 2030 was created based on fundamental change management principles. One, defining the direction of change. Two, overcoming inertia. And three, starting the journey. Of course, as industrial, commercial, and institutional resources, even waste, are trade matters, this requires concerted effort from all stakeholders globally. Mission 2030 can help every individual and organization anywhere support change in industry purchasing and practices to transform to a more circular economy or life cycle development where we lead by example and can go on. This initiative enables all stakeholders to work collectively and more effectively as a whole, making the most informed decision in the early project process to avoid creating waste in the first place. It provides reliable and nonpartisan information from a growing global body of knowledge, eager to inspire and motivate each other for the best built environment possible. But such a change will take many years and, all things considered, cost millions to implement and ensure through strategic change management, effective communication, integration and learner-centered education, tools and support, and research and technology. To minimize cost and time requirements while maximizing synergies, we've begun creating strategic alliances with many important wide-ranging organizations, from regional to international, that have made significant financial or in-kind contributions. We also have a growing list of Mission 2030 pledgers gladly engaging, indicating that we are on the right path. That said, our greatest need moving forward is for all to come together in contributing in whatever way possible to build an undeniable business case for building lifecycle development. Ensure that these recoverable discarded materials are treated for their fair value rather than dumped cross borders or in developing countries for most people. Engaging all major stakeholders to collaborate in Mission 2030. For more information on Mission 2030, visit us at www.cricapital.com.
Okay, thank you very much. Who would like to ask the first question? We can just go down the line, if that's all right?
Sure, absolutely.
Sure, John.
Some questions, but a few comments. I appreciated reading the report. I think the proposal, I think the comprehensive and strategic nature of the proposal is very wise. This is not just about the mistakes that have been made in the past. Is not just about material flows or about a particular technology or about processes of demolition. It's really a whole organizational restructure, economic sector restructuring, and it's really all about bringing stakeholders together and redefining the value of these flows. I think there's an academic part of this, which is I think the best framework to consider this is within the industrial ecology field, and there's an area that has to do with industrial symbiosis. So this is the linking of different flows from different industries within an industry to be able to be both economic and material resource efficient. And I think that's the framework within which I saw this project. I think a couple of facts are really important to get out there. For the built environment, and this includes infrastructure, so construction beyond buildings, 60 to 70% of material throughput is the generally accepted figure. So it's an enormous material throughput. If you just take buildings alone, okay, so maybe that's a third of that number, but we're still talking 20, 30%. We're talking huge, huge numbers. This has been, on the other side, this has been, on the other hand, this has been something that's been looked at for decades. So why is it not working? Why are we not anywhere near? And you wonder about Canada and Ottawa. You have a whole lot of land up there. You know, just build another landfill, right? So, and I think the part of the way to look at the proposal, which I think is very positive, is this: you've established a series of targets. So this is a project focused on a transition from where we are now to the target of 100%. The only point in that transition that I would maybe question would be the 100% target, only because the incremental cost to go from 90 to 100 is likely going to be huge for those intransigent materials, difficult to process materials, hazardous materials, and otherwise that will find a very, it will be very difficult to find a use, reuse, and so that's the only point in the transition that I wonder about. But essentially your step process, I think, makes a lot of sense. So just in synopsis, I think this is really about a culture of recovery and reuse, and I really appreciate that. So my question is, it was not clear in your proposal, though, what the step-by-step process is. So what do you do first? It wasn't clear to me. You've got a very nice, comprehensive, holistic picture. I was looking for action items, and just the first few. And if you could answer that, it'd be great.
Okay. All right. Steve?
My comments are very similar to John's final points related to where do you start? Is it the education of the generator? Is it the creation of the markets that actually find value in waste as a commodity? Is it the institutional environment? And do I mean by that national, provincial, local? That sets the requirements in place that then someone has to be the chicken and someone has to be the egg. And so can I build a market in the absence of the institutional environment? Can I build an institutional environment in the absence of markets or in the absence of those markets, all I've done is impose tremendous costs on the generator or on the hauler. And so how do you deal with that vicious cycle problem? So similar to what John said.
Yeah.
Thanks. First, let me preface my comments by saying this is an area I know very little about, which I guess maybe qualifies me to be here. But I certainly don't know as much as my colleagues do on the panel. So I'm going to raise some questions and make some comments whose answers might be obvious to everybody else. So I'll apologize if they are. But I really like the proposal. I think it's a tremendously important and laudable set of goals embedded in this. I do have just a couple of issues, one of which is much larger than the other. I'll mention the smaller one first. You did mention the idea that making this kind of transition promises to be a very expensive proposition. And there's certainly no reason why this particular set of issues shouldn't be tackled along with lots of others. But at some point, I think you have to address the question of whether the expense of doing this, particularly if you're trying to reach the 100% goal, could conceivably be better spent somewhere else, particularly if your goal has something to do with carbon reduction as opposed to just reducing waste. Not that that's just a little thing. The second, perhaps a little larger issue has to do with what I think is a kind of a lack of an overall articulation of a strategy of social change and corporate change. I see in the proposal lots of specific actions, but I found myself having difficulty making judgments about whether I thought those actions would be effective because I don't know what the overall strategy is, and I don't know what the overall, if, I'll apologize again for using this term, but the overall theoretical construct is for how you're going to achieve the change that's being proposed. I found myself saying, well, maybe that'll work, but maybe it won't. What is the theory that would make me think that it will work? I'm sure there are such theories, and I'm sure that you know those theories, but I just found myself looking for what those justifications are.
Let me just chime in a couple of items here. One, it seems to me that having built a house in recent years and dealt with the waste issue because it was all being weighed and counted, I realized several things. One, dense things count against you, even though they don't take up very much space in the landfill. And there's some just metric issues here as to how you do this. It's volume that's important for landfills. And then there's also the energy, embedded energy. So throwing away something made of aluminum is a terrible thing to do because there's so much embedded energy, but it doesn't weigh very much. So getting those metrics right, it seems to me, is important. The cost of we're talking about really disassembly here, and maybe someday by 2030, buildings will be designed for eventual disassembly, whereas now they are not. There's just no thought to be given to that at all. So that just getting on that track would be an important thing to do. And labor costs of disassembly can be very high, which makes me wonder if this would work in a Canadian city or an American city where labor costs to hire the people to carefully take things apart for reuse, for example. On the other hand, there's been some evidence around here that because of LEED standards for getting credit for reused materials, there is a market, and there are a couple of small companies have sprung up to take advantage of that. And there's often beautiful wood and other things that just gets trashed when buildings are torn down rather than disassembled. And so setting up some kind of incentive system where there's an advantage for the extra cost that it costs to recover them that way rather than disassemble. So those are just some observations. Would you like to respond?
So this is on, I guess?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your attention and questions, and they're all great. And certainly all questions we've grappled with. This has been a very long journey. I've been 30 years in the construction industry, various sectors, from the supply to the contracting, general, working very, very closely with the architectural community. And part of my journey in the early into mid 2000 was very much a realization of how big the problem was. I'm a LEED accredited professional, and I thought that was going to give me a whole lot of answers. And I thought when Canada adopted the LEED, and this will give us, we'll start to change things. But I realized that the problem was much more behavioral, much more industry. We're working in silos, and we're not working closely enough with academia and so on. Where it really hit me a few years ago was that when we were looking at the Conference Board of Canada, the waste generation per capita in Canada, we were the last of 17 OECD countries, and we were trailing the U.S. Just before us.
That's always a bad thing to be.
And then I was thinking, why are we in Canada adopting LEED, which started in the U.S., and which really there are countries who are doing much better. Why are we not following? Anyways, so a long list of questions really got me to want to create the CRI Council and Mission 2030. It's the first initiative. And so I'll try and go back to the questions maybe one by one, and hopefully we'll have painted a clearer picture. In terms of academia, and I think that we don't use academia enough. Ryerson University in Canada was doing a lot of work on embodied energy, life cycle assessment, deconstruction, and so on. And Um, we weren't aware of half the work that was going on. There's a lot of work in Washington, Catholic University, and so on. So I was wondering why we weren't tapping into that. So we've started to do that. I think it's very important. So now we work with Ryerson closely with the Architectural and Science Group. We've started working with Guelph University with the Environmental Engineering Division because there's a lot of nanotechnologies being brought into building materials, which is good in some ways, but what will happen to these materials at the end of their life cycle? We now have interest from other universities literally around the world because we launched Mission 2030 as a global initiative. If we extract building materials from one country, we cut it and we do something to it in another and move it around, put it in a building in Canada, and because we are part of the North American Free Trade Agreement, when I demolish that building, I can literally send that material to a northern US landfill for a fraction of the tipping fee. So all of a sudden we're looking at international laws and so on. So we really needed to look at things globally. That means working with universities that have to try to not reinvent the research that has been done and tap into that brain power. In terms of the 100% figure, we question ourselves a lot onto, do we want to do that? I mean, the reality is it's a vision. It's, in a perfect world, can we reach zero waste? Who knows? Today, no, absolutely not. But in 2030, we don't know what the technologies are, what the policies are going to be. And then I always say it's kind of like a 2x4. We're in the construction industry after all, and a 2x4 stopped being a 2x4 a long time ago. So the other thing that I will say is when we look at charts of the total waste stream, we see in Canada, and I suspect from everything I've seen in the US, it's much the same, and in many other countries. So municipalities are doing most municipalities are working very hard at residential waste. So if you look at the waste diversion, the waste being sent to landfill, there's less and less. So if you're looking at that from a graph point, that's about 1/3 of the total stream of residential waste going to landfill. If you're looking at non-residential, industrial, commercial, and institutional, we're going like this. So the overall chart is we're barely making a difference. So when people ask me, well, what if we don't succeed? What if you don't do 100% by 2030? Like, quite frankly, by 2030, if I can have switched that line to going the other way, I think that I will be pretty proud of what I've achieved because we're heading for disaster. By 2025, if we keep on this path, waste will double in the world. And half the world population lives in its waste right now, and the developing countries are sending much of their non-residential waste to developing countries. We have to change that. If it's not right for us to send it to a US dump for a fraction of the tipping fees, it's not right to send it to a developing countries that can't even deal with it. So I think that social awareness has to be raised. The step-by-step actions, well, the first one was taking a Mission 2030 pledge, raising the awareness. A lot of people don't know about the transborder dumping. So, just that alone. And where do we start? Well, by getting organized. I think that as a building industry, it's a massive sector. We have to get organized. And right now, that's what we're trying to do. In terms of expenses, we don't really know what the figures are going to be. We know it's going to be in millions, but we also know that if we all work at trying to improve ourselves individually in our own little corner, collectively we'll spend a whole lot more than if we work at the problems together. So that, in terms of expenses, we have to address that. Will it work? Well, I know that if we do nothing, nothing will work. And so I go back to that chart. We know that to date the policies have not worked. The lead is only 25% in Canada of the building permits, What about all the non-lead projects? What about all the do-it-yourself projects? What about, so we know that we have to do something. Measurements and embodied energy is definitely something we are wanting to address. So we've partnered with an organization called Athena Sustainable Materials Institute. We're now a partner of the United Nations Environment Program and working very closely with the Sustainable Building Climate Initiative and some of the task groups within the World Waste organizations and task groups. So because if you look at the embodied energy or even the methane, which is 24 times more greater global warming potential, there's an immense capacity to reduce some of the carbon footprint coming from waste. And the last two items were the deconstructions. So we started our journey, and I guess that goes back also to the actions. We started our journey when we launched Mission 2030. We launched it in February, and we've been focusing with the architectural, the design community, the building community. Just a few weeks ago, we held another group when we brought all of the building owners, managers, policymakers from across the country that we could think of that would be participating. And basically we said, okay, this is what we've done to date. Are you going to support this when we get to you? And because we need to build the infrastructure, because when the public starts demanding it to the policymakers, the industry has to be ready and the infrastructure has to be there. So we need leaders and financial institutions and policymakers to support our initiative. So we've done that. I've participated in the development of the first deconstruction standard in Canada with the Canadian Standards Association. And it was a follow-up to a guideline for design for disassembly and adaptability. And so some of our actions are getting involved, and as our group is growing, we're trying to tackle all of these issues. And obviously, there are some great lead success stories and some emerging businesses coming out of this. So we're trying to grab as many success stories as we can. Our next thing is trying to show business success stories that can come out of this to reflect a more circular economy. But it certainly is a challenge because we're a volunteer organization and we're not yet funded by any group. So it's a journey is my favorite saying these days. So I hope that answered your questions.
That's helpful. Should we just let's go to the audience, see if there are any questions from the audience. How would you like your construction waste dealt with? Yes, John. That was a comment basically saying that despite even when it's economically feasible to do so, there are so many social and business relationship dimensions that are largely invisible,
Yeah.
and therefore difficult to address. And I think that's this is from someone who I know has significant, deep personal experience with this. So we should take that with as an important insight. There's another question back here. Yes, sir.
So there's a few things that happened over the last few months. One of them in Canada, because of that push-pull, so the two questions very much relate. So there's, in Canada, we just developed and launched a few weeks ago a new National Zero Waste Council. So from that came, packaging. So it started by the Metro Vancouver. It's funded in part by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. It works with organizations like, I'm on the board of directors, and there's a whole bunch of like packaging industry, private sector, and really coming from all walks. What we know in Canada, we're going to get the extended producer's responsibility, and I know that that's a really big discussion in the U.S. as well, and pretty much everywhere around the world. But if you do things from policies alone, you're going to get a lot of resistance from the private industry. So it has to be that push-pull. But how do you do that? And one example I will give in driving markets, to create new ways, because if I try and solve the problem just within the building industry, when the drywall board is done, the drywall contractor doesn't want it anymore. Well, who would? Well, it so turns out that the agricultural sector wants it. Well, we've never talked to the agricultural sector. They want it for animal bedding and soil additive. Well, that's great. So maybe we have that in market, but wait a second. We have to be careful that we don't give them contaminated gypsum material. We have a lot of asbestos in some of the mud for a period of time when that was, the way to do it, right? So we have to, a few words I've heard recently really drove it home to me. What we're looking for is safe cycles and final sinks. And I thought that was a brilliant way to describe it, because the small companies might not be able to upcycle or do biomimicry like Dow or some of these companies are investing into, but maybe they can at least safe downcycle and ensure that it goes to a good final sink. And in terms of tracking, that has to be part of, in LEED, if we can track it for LEED, we can track it for every building. So that's making sure that the extended producer responsibility formula that we end up with is aligned in Canada and US, and that it is, that we accept the same principles. And because if we're each other's biggest partners, we should, in terms of industrial waste and resources, we should be making sure these policies align.
A couple more minutes. Just ask you one thing. When I lived in Germany in the mid-1980s, they were beginning the take-back laws there, the extended producer responsibility. And I remember going in and discovering that toothpaste didn't come in a box anymore because the toothpaste company was going to have to take the box back, and now it's moved on to you know, when you buy your BMW or Volkswagen, it's designed for disassembly, and the company has to take it back at the end of its life. I think they've also Germany has also been way ahead in construction waste reduction. So just a suggestion would be to let's look where the leaders are and find out what we can learn from them. I think it's important to do that.
Yeah, and actually we write about it in our report and you know, certainly wasn't maybe in the abstract, but they are certainly an exemplar of what we want to do, which is integrate and work together at the problem. And they've reduced their construction waste by 80%. So maybe they'll get to the last 20% by 2030.
Well, and it seems to me the way to do that is begin prioritizing, find out what can be done at the lowest cost, what has the biggest impact, and work on that. And if the gross tonnage, if there's a few percent left over, it may be things that don't matter that much, and you know, we can and don't have to prioritize those up front. Well, thank you. That's a very interesting proposal. For those of you who don't follow this very closely, there is something called Architecture 2030, which is again an idea put forth by an individual architect originally, and now picked up as a mission to actually reduce emissions from buildings and net energy use from buildings down to zero by 2030. And this picks up on that waste idea, the waste idea as well. So these are interesting ideas that are coming not from governments, by the way, but are coming from individuals and organizations and NGOs and civil society, and I think that's really significant. That's what's happening. So thank you very much. Thank you. All right, let's move on to our final case, which has the cryptic title EE-based formalization, which it took me a little time to figure out what that means. EE stands for energy efficiency. Formalization refers to moving informal buildings, that is, those that are not legal and official in certain countries. And I guess the case is Montenegro, a former republic of Yugoslavia. And I wasn't aware that that was a huge problem in Montenegro, but we will learn here shortly about that. So could you please tell us about how energy efficiency and buildings fit into this business of making these informal buildings and communities formal or legal or whatever you're trying to do with them. Thank you. Have the first, yeah, we have the first video, please, or the video, please, the third video.
Montenegro, small country of 620,000 people in southeastern Europe, is facing a complex challenge of developing energy. On one side, there are around 100,000 people in Montenegro. If no one are distributed, this will be vital. Every other household is a single house. A single house is one that doesn't have a construction. On the other side, Montenegro needs an average 8.5 times more energy than an average field. What is common to these two seemingly unrelated problems? A solution that is solved. We wonder if energy efficiency could result in financial savings of energy bills if families are moved to transition. This is the basis of this solution. First, we support families to reduce their energy bills through a variety of basic measures: insulation, external walls, roofs, floors, and replacement windows, doors. Second, we invest those savings into paying for legalization of their homes and energy efficiency measures. Key aspect of this solution is that the family does not pay any extra money after electing, so the solution is fully expenditure neutral. We have some early results from testing this solution in several houses. To encourage each family and keep out its new quality in the north of Montenegro, joined this initiative offering their house test installation. In short, for a 100 square meter house, a 5,000 euros investment in energy efficiency gives 830 euros in savings annual energy cost, which is equal to 63% reduction. Payback period for the initial investment is 12 years, after which the energy savings become income to come. In addition to better quality of life and legal ownership of home is applied to all illegal construction in Montenegro, the solution has the potential to generate 6,000 new jobs, increase GDP by 1.5% annually in 6 years, resulting in 470 million euros direct investment in the construction sector and 80 million euros in VAT income at the same time.
Okay. Right. John, you want to go first again?
Sure. So I'll be very brief. I think it's not my area of expertise, but I have questions about the financing and how that all works. I'll leave that to others since it's not mine. So the building technology part of this, I think it makes all the sense in the world, the proposal, the items that are highlighted, the exterior wall, the windows, the floor, thermal insulation. The dollar spent in making the building more efficient is the smartest dollar that these people can probably spend in reducing their household expenditures. The piece of this which is not quite clear to me is why would this just not be an energy retrofit project? In other words, if it does have some positive economic consequences with job creation, clearly there needs to be a capital outlay from someone, and if that happens and reduces energy, does the formalization really matter as part of the project? So in other words, so my suggestion is maybe it's useful for some sector of this work, some part of this work. Maybe it doesn't need to happen for other parts of the work, and it would seem to me, just as a building technology person, you would just want to do this anyway. One other issue that came to mind is indoor air quality. I'm not sure if it was addressed at all, but I don't know if you have an air barrier. If you do, if that's part of it, or the houses are simply going to become more, they'll be sealed better. So I believe it's probably natural gas and maybe for the most part, electricity. Okay, electricity mostly. Okay, so the indoor air quality is not really an issue. Okay, I mean, I'll leave my comments to that.
Thanks. Very interesting idea. Couple things jump to mind. I mentioned earlier the energy efficiency project related to street lighting, and the way we are structuring the financing is that we're essentially ring fencing savings. There is a way to guarantee that any savings go back to pay for the bond. So that's how you achieve the payback or the return to the investors. One of the big issues here is obviously if it's 830, 860 euro savings per year. How will we capture that? How will we guarantee that is set aside? That's going to be obviously a critical factor. And so that will relate to the structure of the loan. Is it a loan? Is it some other type of payment? We have many examples. PACE financing, is growing around the world. This is an attempt to use the property tax system as a way of helping to pay off these type of efficiency upgrades. There are utilities who will front the money, and then they will essentially levelize your bill payment, and over time you will be paying off the cost of the upgrade, and after some period of time, once you've paid it off, then you capture and your bill will actually be reduced. The final piece relates to 12.6 years payback. That is very patient capital. I'm sorry. Okay, all right, I'm sorry. I transposed some numbers. That's still very patient capital. And that's not that's something that we would probably entertain. In your part of the world, EBRD might be interested in doing this kind of work. I would assume they would actually be very highly engaged in this. But part of this could probably be done as a result of EU monies that might be made available. And I would presume that would be a huge pot of money that you could be tapping into through the 2014-2020 operating program. Is that what you're planning on doing? Okay. So for those of you who don't understand this cryptic language that I'm speaking in terms of
It's bank speak.
It's bank speak. And essentially, I'm working on a project in Romania. That's why I know about this right now, where there are funds being made available to different EU member countries for extended periods of time, in this case 2014 through 2020, and serious money, billions of dollars, are made available for different infrastructure upgrades, different types of investments to help these new member countries of the European Union get up to a certain minimum income level, quality of life, environmental performance record, what have you. And I don't want to characterize it as free money, but it's essentially free money. Someone's paying for it, but for Montenegro, it's going to be free money. It's found money. And so that's a huge opportunity to capture that and begin to apply it to something like that.
I guess one of the consequences of going third is that most of what I would say is always being said before. So, but I would just say that very impressed by the proposal. I can understand how you ended up being a winner here, especially given the scale of what you're talking about. 100,000 homes is not a trivial target.
It was a sixth of the population.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I would reiterate some aspects of what John said, particularly with respect to the formalization side of this. I have to confess I didn't quite get the role of formalization in this whole proposal. To state it John's way, why isn't this just an energy efficiency program? There must be something there that isn't being said. Maybe you don't need to say it, but I think we all wondered, what the link is between the energy efficiency and the formalization process. So much so that there are points in the proposal where you almost get the sense that the energy efficiency is subordinate to the formalization. So I'd like to know a little bit more about that, if you're willing and able to say some things about that. Let's see. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you.
I just have, I'd like to shift away from that dimension to really looking at the social dimension here. I mean, what is the position of someone who is in an unformalized what's their position in society? I mean, are they subject to prosecution? Are they facing threats of fines? I mean, and therefore there's an incentive for them to move away from that. Is it socially acceptable or unacceptable? I mean, I just don't know Montenegro that well, so I'm just curious about that. And so what's the relationship between possible penalties, other than the fact, I mean, this person who testified was basically, oh, we have heat now. I mean, that would seem to be a real incentive to go with this program. So what is the penalty reward ratio here or structure?
Okay.
Something about that. So
Thank you so much for your comments and questions. I'll try to take them one at a time. Why is this energy efficiency? Why is it not only energy efficiency project? So in UNGP as well as in the government, a separate side of the house deals with sort of energy efficiency projects. And one of the things that we've seen, and I don't think this is really unique to Montenegro, is that citizens just don't really always make decisions that are in their best interest. They don't avail of this, not maybe free money, but very subsidized money that they can use for energy efficiency. So we got in touch with the nudge unit from the UK government, the behavioral insights team, and we wanted to know from the experts, have you done any work on this? Why do people not make decisions that are hitting their wallets the very next month. And they've done this research in the UK where they show that, so they offer three packages to citizens. One, you do energy efficiency, you get 25% from the government for the package. Two, since in London, this was done in London, they have those townhomes that are in the row. If you bring 4 friends to the package, your retrofit's free. And the third one is, and this was the most expensive one, you sign up, the company comes in, they clean your attic, and then they do energy retrofit. So this option was picked 300 times more than all the other two. It was the most expensive one, but it was the hassle factor. People could not be bothered to sign up for energy efficiency loans because they couldn't be bothered to clean up their attic. And that's the first thing that they had to do before the company came in, right? So the idea came, I'm part of the team where I lead the team where there's a team on energy efficiency and team on urban planning. And this was the problem in urban planning, formalization. This was the primary problem we were looking at. And then we put the teams together and said, hang on a second, maybe we have something here. Maybe we can use energy efficiency as a nudge to get people to sign up to legalize their homes. And this is how the idea came about. Now, in terms of social position of these people, it varies. This boom in illegal construction took place after the Montenegro renewed its independence in 2006.
Yes.
So very quickly, the government had to sort of set up the country, set up the sort of the ministries and the whole governance system. A lot of money came into the country, both from the perspective of foreign aid and investment. And all of a sudden, people started building. You know, the young people were able to get money to build their own homes and move out from their parents' homes. And in a lot of these cases, these houses were not illegal because people built their houses on someone else's land. They built it on their land. But since it wasn't urbanized because the local administration didn't have the capacities or the money to create the variety of plans, they weren't able to issue them construction permits or use permits. So the demographics vary. We don't have the 100,000 illegal homes inventorized to be able to understand what are the demographics behind them. What we do know is that in one region, the World Bank actually did some research, and this is the only sort of primary research that we have to draw from. In the northern region, the poorer you are, more likely you are to live in an illegal house. So when we did the demonstration, we specifically targeted poor neighborhoods and set out the criteria based on which you could apply and would be selected. And we tried to target the poorest of the poor for the demonstration. And in those cases, I mean, these people literally live on concrete. And just sort of some anecdotal evidence, if you will, when we went and met with the families, you have, they had these health issues that come from. So this guy, after a couple of months, said, I feel well. I don't know if this is a placebo effect of it all, but I feel well enough to go out and look for work. Now, how do you capture that in this whole equation? So, in terms of the enforcement, one of the big critiques of the problem that I get is, well, if the government were enforcing the rules and the policies, you wouldn't have this problem to begin with. A lot of things have changed since 2006. So the government is sort of coming around to this problem, one of which is obviously the financial crisis. These 100,000 homes are not paying taxes. So this is this huge amount of money that's untapped for the government. Now, they cannot go out and say pay taxes. And if you don't, what are you going to do? Destroy the house? No, these people vote. And that's economic activity, right? So you don't want to destroy the house. You can't make them pay if they don't have the money, and a lot of them don't. So energy prices as well, in the span from 2006 to now, they've grown some 35 to 40%. We're still paying energy almost half as less as the EU average. So in terms of the payback period, 6.1 years, this was a calculation done based on the prices from early last year, I want to say. And since, the prices have gone up 12%. So we are likely,
shortens the time
yes,
to pay back even more.
The energy market is set to liberalize in the Balkans in the next 2 years, I think, at which point in time we'll be all paying sort of free market. prices for energy, which is going to decrease the payback period. Our calculation is it's a bit of, we cheated a little bit in the calculations, right? We took the work that we've done in 4 houses, and we literally extrapolated it to 100,000. There are a bunch of things that we're not capturing, but we needed some quick, sort of flashy figures to get a little bit. For example, we're not accounting a rebound effect. One of the issues that was brought in to the other proposals. One of the things that we don't know how to answer is when these people start paying taxes, they will expect municipality to reinvest them in the infrastructure immediately. There's not really possibly going to be enough taxes at scale to be able to do this. So how do we make sure that this gap doesn't sort of grow, in which case the legitimacy of the municipal government comes under question from their voters, right?
So managing expectations is a huge part of
It's
it.
there are a number. So we're sort of proceeding on 2 tracks. One, we have a lot of research institutes that are interested to work with us on the research side of things, and we think this is positive. Having said that, I think this is one of those in the complexity science domain areas where the things will emerge that we're not even really sure what they are. So our next step on the practical side is to try to, instead of picking 4 sort of isolated houses, to try to pick a sort of a compact neighborhood where we would be able to run another pilot. And it's going to be pilots because, for example, the financing mechanism, there are a number of different ways that we can go about this. And somebody raised the issue of, I think the World Bank colleague, how do you ensure that the savings will be reallocated for this? Well, one of the things that is happening now is that by the end of next year, I think every household in Montenegro will have a smart meter. In other words, an electricity company person does not have to come into your home and depend on you opening the door so he can get a reading, so you can get a bill the next month, which is the way things have been going on for the last 20, 30 years. Oh, sorry. But they will be able to shut off your electricity remotely, and then you will have no electricity. However, there are also households that are not paying for electricity at the moment. This scheme means nothing, right? Because they are not paying for it. Now, this is going to change once the smart meters are, introduced. They will shut them off. So, I think at this point in time, we know what we know, but I think there are a lot more things that we don't know, and the only way that we will get at it is by applying different methods in households and trying to see which, especially financing, is works.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Yes, please.
The cities to pay for legalization. The authorities, the local. Yeah, no, that's.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there are 2 types. There are 2 ways in which you pay a real estate tax. The first one is a sort of an upfront tax that you pay based on the square meters of the house, the use of the house, the flooring, what purpose is it used, how many family members, and so on and so forth. And this is the big tax that you have to pay in order to get a title to your home, that then you can use for collateral in the bank and so on and so forth. And then on annual basis, you pay a real estate tax. So, I mean, it's a fair point, to be quite honest. I haven't really thought of that, but my guess would be that the local authorities will want to sort of collect from some of the money that from the real estate taxes, because these houses are connected to some basic infrastructures like the water supply, the waste, and so on and so forth.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, the retrofit that we've done in these four homes is sort of the most basic thing that we can. So we exchange window. We took the old windows out, put better energy efficiency windows and doors. Um, it might have to do. My guess would be that it has to do with the standard of construction. And this was our initial hunch. Before we did a test in four houses, we did research. We did energy retrofits in about 40 households in 3 different geographic. Montenegro is a very small country, but geography varies. And that's where we realized what a poor standard of construction these households use to put their homes together. That's where we realized how big of a savings. Yes, 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 yeah, yes, yeah.
Yes.
It would also seem like from what I could see, the, a lot of concrete frame, structural tile infill, and it's probably pretty easy to pop those windows out as opposed to here where they're within wood frame construction, and then you've got layers to deal with.
Yes.
So it's probably really, really easy just to touch them and they
Yes,
fall out,
yes,
and then
absolutely.
to replace.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the video before, some of those houses are on there. I mean, and you wouldn't think. In the U.S., I can't imagine a family living in a house like that. Yeah, yeah. Thanks, though. Good, good.
But well, certainly there's no incentive for me to get my house legalized if I have to first pay to do that, and then I get done for taxes, and there's no enforcement process. So it seems to me that everything is designed to keep me from legalizing my house. So
It has been, hence the problem. Yes,
yeah.
yes.
But as you're suggesting, this is being tightened up, and even the supplying of electricity, which there are a lot of people probably get electricity free, and that's not going to be the case in the future. So you're providing them an incentive by, as I see it, you're providing them the incentive of the energy costs saved, plus the comfort and the well-being levels that go up a lot.
And you're not paying anything extra out of your pocket the very
Yes.
next month. This was was the deal that we had with when we approached the ministry. We said, look, you can do this number of ways, but the one that we think stands the best chance to win is if you sort of create a refinancing package for a family based on those savings.
Yes.
Which means that you would really have to be invested in this project, because the only way it makes sense for the municipalities is to really play on scale. That's when you can recover the costs even on a monthly level that makes sense for you from the perspective of maintaining or rather upgrading the infrastructure.
Okay. Maybe we have time for maybe just one more question, or is any from the audience? Or
Can I just?
oh yes, please.
What's happening with all the waste that's coming out of the old windows?
Well, we plan to invite you to Montenegro to help us.
I think that's actually a really important problem. We talk so much about upgrading our buildings. You know, it was by 2050. 90% of the stock of the buildings that we need already exist, and we're retrofitting them. And we see projects, the renovation being aside from that consideration of the material coming out. You don't want these old windows, to go into a new building. You don't want to reuse these old windows, but you need to think about where they're going to go. And so, what can you do with them? And the toilets and the all these things. So, anyways, just food for thought.
A good question on which to end this panel. It's nice to see interaction among these projects, and if you can figure a way to have net adjusted LEDs there as well, we will have squared the circle. Good. Well, I want to again congratulate the 3 winners on your proposals. Some wonderfully intricate and complex thinking has gone into these projects, which address not only the technology of this or even the emissions of this, but a number of social dimensions as well, which is, I think, really key. Something we often it's too easy to overlook the social dimensions, and yet those are really critical to getting acceptance and getting engagement and making it happen. So congratulations to all 3 of you for that. And I'd also like to thank my fellow panelists here for your taking the time, checking these proposals out ahead of time, being prepared to ask good questions and make good observations. And I hope that for the three prize winners, that this hour and a half has been productive for them as well, giving them new insights, additional insights that will help them move their projects forward. And thanks to you, the audience, for being here. So with this, I guess we close this panel of the CoLab competition. Thank you.